Welcome tonight to the Brooks Memorial Library. This is our first talk of the fall season. I know it doesn't feel that way, but we're heading into fall. And I'd just like to mention before I introduce Jane Marinsky that the Friends of Brooks Memorial Library newsletter is available and out, and that will give you all the talks, lectures, presentations that we'll have up through December. So if you are local and would like to pick up an issue of the newsletter, please do at the library. It's also available, all the events are also available on our website at www.brooks.lib.bt.us. Thank you. I'm extremely pleased tonight to have Jane Marinsky, who has been exhibiting her children's book illustrations in our children's book illustrators case on the second floor. It's down now. She has taken it down, so you won't be able to see it, but she will show some examples tonight on the using her PowerPoint. First of all, I'd like to thank Simi Berman for facilitating the process to get Jane here at the library. Simi is our children's book illustrator, so if you know of any children's book illustrators, please contact us at the library. The library's email address is on the website, and I'll pass it on to Simi. Although I think we're pretty well booked up for the next few months, but we're always looking for new talent out there to exhibit. I'll give you a little background on Jane. For many years, she was an editorial illustrator, working for such publications as the Washington Post, New York Magazine, American Bar Association, and she also enjoys teaching illustration at Damon College in Amherst, New York. The Goat-Faced Girl is her first foray into children's books, but because of that experience, she hopes there will be many more. She spends her winters in Buffalo. That's a change. Winters in Buffalo and summers in Vermont. So please welcome Jane Marinsky.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, all of you. I know it's been a hard time in Brattleboro the past week, so I appreciate all of you who came. And I want to introduce my daughter, Leah Sharp, who wrote the story, and I'll talk more about that and her involvement during the presentation. But first, Leah is a student, and she's getting her PhD in conservation biology, and so I'm very proud of her. But first we'll read the book. I'll show the pictures. Sometimes I forget to turn the pages. Just poke me, Leah. Okay, so. Can you see?
My magic glasses are
Once upon a time, long ago and far away, a baby was left in the forest. This event wasn't so strange in itself, for lost children appeared in this particular forest every third Thursday. But this foundling was an infant girl who was far too young for quests, unable to understand talking animals, and even too young to interest the witch in the gingerbread house. Since no one had any idea what to do with her, everyone thought it best to just leave her alone. 3 days later, a rather large lizard came along. After careful consideration, picked up the baby in its teeth and carried her home. The other forest dwellers were astonished, but since the baby had become a tripping hazard, they decided not to interfere with the lizard's plans. As soon as the lizard had returned to its dwelling, it placed the baby on the floor and transformed itself into a beautiful woman. The lizard was really a powerful sorceress who had heard murmurings about the abandoned child and decided to take the poor baby under her protection and raise her as her own. Over the years, the baby, Isabella, grew into a lovely girl. She was polite, intelligent, and almost everything that a mother would want a daughter to be. Unfortunately, Isabella was also unbelievably lazy. Some days she stayed in her pajamas until noon because getting dressed was just too tiring. She would never walk with her friends to the village pastry shop because it was too far away. She would rather stay in and brush her hair before a mirror than play hopscotch in the forest. and she would never help the lizard lady gather herbs for her magic. The lizard lady realized this was not exactly a good quality in a child, but she could think of no way to change Isabella. Even when she offered to teach Isabella to become a sorceress, Isabella would bat her eyelashes and respond sweetly, "But dear mother, you will always be here if I need magical help, won't you?" So Isabella grew from a lovely, lazy girl into a lovely, lazy young woman. One day there was a knock on the door. Isabella was busy lying on the couch, eating grapes and twirling her hair around her fingers. The lizard lady opened the door to find a prince. "I'm Prince Rupert," he said abruptly. "I need some food and drink." With that, he marched into the house and flopped onto the couch next to Isabella, knocking over her plate of grapes. With the grapes rolling around on the floor, the lizard lady served them tea and cakes. Rupert and Isabella eyed each other appreciatively, agreeing on how they loved to be served. The lazy twosome decided they had a lot in common, and by the end of their visit, they had decided to marry. Prince Rupert then arranged for a carriage to come take his lovely, lazy Isabella to the castle. The next morning, the lizard lady watched with dismay as Isabella waved gaily from the departing carriage. She thought to herself, if she marries him, she'll never stop being lazy. She'll never learn to do anything for herself. I must stop this marriage before it's too late. Then, with a sly smile, the lizard lady made a sweeping gesture toward the carriage. "I think that should do it," she chuckled. At the palace, Rupert had gathered his entire court to welcome Isabella, but when she emerged from the carriage, everyone froze in horror. Somehow, the lovely Isabella had the head of a goat. As they recovered from their shock, they all began to laugh at the ridiculous sight. The same magic that had given Isabella a goat head, however, prevented her from realizing what had happened. Although everyone else saw a goat head, she smiled sweetly at the crowd, believing she was as lovely as ever. "I can't marry this monster," Rupert thought, and immediately rushed her off to a tiny cottage on the edge of his kingdom. When they arrived at the cottage, Isabella was confused. "Where's my beautiful palace full of servants to wait on me?" she asked. Well, there's this rule. In this kingdom, you have to pass certain tests," gulped Rupert. "That's it. You have to pass a test before you can marry the prince and get into the palace. And the first test is to grow turnips. But if you don't want to, you can always give up and go away, or home." And with that, Rupert fled. For a while, a fuming Isabella stomped around the cottage, muttering to herself. She was furious at how badly Rupert was treating her, and she thought longingly of her couch and grapes. However, she was greatly tempted by the idea of all those servants at the palace. After a 3-hour nap, Isabella summoned up all her energy and sent a letter to her mother, the lizard lady, asking for help. She then crawled into bed. She was sure the lizard lady would come and take care of everything. So, imagine her surprise when, the next morning, she received nothing but a pile of books, a pair of gardening gloves, a rake, a shovel, and a bag of seeds. She threw up her hands and pulled her ears in frustration, but the thought of a lazy life as Prince Rupert's wife kept her going. After another nap, she opened the books and got to work. 3 weeks later, she showed Rupert the few scraggly, sad little turnips she had managed to produce. "Now you can take me to the palace," she said. "I need servants to pamper me. I've been eating only peanut butter sandwiches for weeks, and I'm so hungry." No. No. Now you have to prepare a feast worthy of royalty, or you can give up. I'll send you home in a carriage, a really nice one," blurted Prince Rupert hopefully. Well, Isabella was so furious that this time she managed to write the note and get it off to her mother without a single nap. The next day, Isabella received a package containing cookbooks, pots, pans, and gadgets whose use Isabella couldn't even begin to imagine. When she saw the pictures of appetizers and cakes in the book, her stomach growled. The peanut butter sandwich suddenly seemed awfully unappetizing. "Well," she said, while licking her lips over a picture of roast duck, "maybe learning to cook isn't the worst thing. Until I go to the palace." After a few mistakes and lots of experimenting, Isabella managed to prepare a tasty-looking meal. Not quite a banquet, but definitely an improvement over peanut butter sandwiches. Just as Isabella was putting the icing on her chocolate cupcakes, Rupert arrived. With a look of horror, he exclaimed, "You did it! Drat! I mean, good. But there's still more. Now you must make your own ball gown from scratch. That's very hard. Maybe you'd prefer to give up. I mean, it has to be really nice." With that, Prince Rupert left without another word. Isabella was puzzled by Rupert's behavior. She furrowed her brow and tried to figure out what was going on. Then she remembered the all-important rule of threes. In any fairy tale or nursery rhyme, it's the third princess, the third knight, or the third task that is the important one. She figured this was just the standard ordeal all girls in these parts were put through before they could marry princes. After all, in one kingdom nearby, they made girls sleep on peas. In another, girls had to attend balls in glass slippers. And as every young woman knows, glass slippers can be pretty uncomfortable. Isabella decided she would make a fabulous gown. Without another thought, Isabella jumped up and ran all the way back home to ask for help from the lizard lady. When Isabella reached her mother's house, she wasted no time explaining what she wanted to do. As Isabella chattered away about the design and fabric of the dress, the lizard lady realized that Rupert's tasks had transformed Isabella into a capable and imaginative young woman. 3 weeks passed. As they worked, the lizard lady was impressed by how much Isabella had changed. Isabella wasn't merely trying to finish the dress. She was doing extra work to make sure the dress was just right, something unique and special. Watching Isabella crouching down to add the final beading to the dress, the lizard lady decided it was finally time to show her daughter her goat head. After Isabella stopped screaming, the lizard lady returned Isabella's own lovely face to her. As the lizard lady hugged Isabella, she explained, "Darling daughter, I was just afraid that if you remained lazy, you would never learn how to do anything." And even Isabella had to admit that she had been spectacularly lazy. Later that day, Prince Rupert came by to see the gown. Isabella was very excited. The turnips had turned out all right, the dress had been pretty good, but the gown was simply perfect. She was also wondering how Prince Rupert would react when he saw that her goat head was gone. Prince Rupert walked in grudgingly, but the moment he saw Isabella, his whole manner changed. He swept her into his arms and said, "You're beautiful again, so now we can be married." And with that began to drag her towards the palace. A troubled Isabella asked, "Don't you care about the final task, the gown?" "Oh no," said Prince Rupert. "I just didn't want to have to marry you when you looked like a goat." By this time, Isabella, who really was as intelligent as she was beautiful, was truly furious. "You mean to tell me you were trying to get rid of me just because I looked funny? You only care about how I look, not who I am?" Rupert readily agreed that this was indeed all he cared about. Isabella turned to him with her hands on her hips and said, "I'm sure I'd be quite bored with someone as lazy and stupid as you." With that, she pushed the stunned prince away from the cottage and told him never to come back. After the prince departed, Isabella returned to her mother's home. "Mother," she said, "Rupert is a bird brain. I don't want to marry him. He didn't care about me, just my looks. Besides, I'm proud of all the things I can do now. And I was thinking maybe, if you still want to, could you teach me how to become a sorceress?" The lizard lady was overjoyed. She looked at the lovely, but no longer lazy Isabella and asked, "What would you like to do first?" And that, dear reader, is how this came to pass.
Thank you, Leah. You're welcome. So as you can see, that it's very important to have a good story to start with. Okay, so I know that some of you are here because you're interested in knowing about the whole process I went through. And I thought I'd take you back a little bit to before I was doing children's books. Before I was doing children's books, this is the kind of work I did. It was editorial work, and for different magazines. This was for the Chicago Bar Review about the First Amendment rights. This is about, for the LA Times, about people you'd rather not have your daughter date, and Leah was the model for this. This was for a financial story about working on the numbers. This was a story for the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and it was about how working women sometimes become envious of their babysitters. And this was about sexual harassment by divorce lawyers of their clients for the American Bar Association. This was a story about how the restaurant, in the restaurant industry, the service, people who claim to have the best service are usually the ones that have the worst. This was an article about a sports bar, so I took it quite literally. And it's a different kind of approach, and I used colored pencil. Now, in recent year, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, I decided to get my master's in illustration, and I just needed to do something else. I needed to get revive my interest, and even though I love doing editorial illustration, I just wanted to be exposed to more and get a spark. One of the classes I took was children's book illustration with Richard Egelski. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's done a lot of books and done wonderful things. And we had to come with a story. And I'm not a writer, but Leah always told stories. So to the kids that she babysat, and she revised them, and she had a little bit of a feminist view of things. So she wrote down her story from me. Usually when I give this presentation, I say my daughter, Leah, wrote the story, and give them a pause, and then say, well, yes, this is Leah now. For a while, they think I have this, this amazing. Well, not that she isn't amazing, she is, but precocious. So the manuscript, the first thing you get, and the most important thing about a children's book is a good story. You need a solid story. No matter how beautiful the illustrations are, you're not going to sell the book unless it has a good story. So I take the text, and I was doing this during a week session at Syracuse University, staying in a hotel. So you can see the notes I started making, and then typed it out a little more clearly. And these would go through many revisions. I made some revisions, and Leah corrected it back. Then these are my notes on the Genesee Inn Hotel stationery for different illustrations that I thought would be interesting. And a lot of them stayed the same, and a lot of them changed. Then this is part of what was in the display that you saw, and again, you can see some of them, you can see are similar to the final illustrations, and some of them are completely different. Here are more, and here are more. And some became double spreads, some came outside. And then I take it to a further, more refined stage where I have the text and sort of approximate how big the text is going to be. And I'll take you through this quickly. Now, this illustration you never saw because it didn't exist, it didn't happen. This one got revised into a double with the little girl on top and the yet older girl on the bottom. This one is in there. This one, obviously, is the cover. This has changed. This has changed, but is basically similar. And this is turned into a 2-page spread. And so then I'll show you the final mock-up that I started, was ready to send out, and I had done a few of the finished pieces. You never want to do all the pieces because they might change the story. So when you're sending out a manuscript, a dummy with a manuscript, if you're doing the whole thing, you want to send out only a few of the illustrations to show what your work will be like. So this is the dummy, and oops, and you can see it's a little more refined, and I've got the spots in place, and the finished illustrations of the ones that I did. And this is looking more like the final book. But the ones that are in black and white still have not been painted. And you'll notice something about this. Does anybody notice something about this one? I'll show you later. And then here it's a double spread. That's a double spread. And that's it. And so, before finishing the paintings, I was trying to send out to different publishers something that would interest them to look at the dummy, because you can't just send out a manuscript and a dummy unsolicited, because they might just throw it away. It could end up in the slush pile, and nobody of any importance will look at it. They usually have an intern looking at the slush pile, unsolicited work, and they'll just throw it out. So I had the idea of putting together a little kit. And I had a couple other, this is what the kit looks like. And inside the kit, I included a box of cards with their note cards as sort of like a present or a bribe, with some of the illustrations as note cards that are already done. And then I sent them a postcard that was self-addressed. I even included a pen so they could fill out the postcard. And I got a lot of them back, pretty good return. Some people were interested in seeing the dummy, and some people would fill out the card and leave their name on. So I had to realize that after that I would write in the name of the person I was sending it to, because they could not always be relied on to do that themselves. So this is what the book looked like when I sent it out, the dummy, and I showed you the individual pages. And then the reason I asked you before if you noticed anything different is, once I did have a contract with David Godine, he made some recommendations. There weren't a lot. He was really easy to work with. But one of the things was he thought that the face of the goat-faced girl was a little scary. So I had to change the face, and you'll see.
The ears change.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oops. Yeah.
Oh, that's it.
But these are more good.
Yeah, and the ears and the eyes, and you know, I've gotten different responses when I've gone to see children, you know, in schools. I'll ask for a vote which one they like better, and sometimes the first one. But I think this one's a little cuter.
It's more humorous too.
Yeah, it's a little less serious, right? So I wanted to show you step by step from thumbnail to finish a few of the different illustrations. Okay, so here's the first little spot I did, thumbnail. Then there. Then I started taking reference pictures. I didn't have any little babies, so I took my daughter's American Girl doll, my youngest daughter, and looked at pictures of babies and squirrels, and I put it all together to make the final illustration. There were even more references, butterflies and things like that. Then, oops, that one I used some of the same reference. I looked at lots of lizards. This is a little girl who brought her own teddy bear. And this is my youngest daughter, who didn't have to pose too hard. She was in a very relaxed, natural position. And then this was the final. And you can see in there I've got the prince, who's, as the doll, who's sort of previewing what's to come.
these are some of the final. Okay, here's the other one where they're, I bet you can hardly even tell what it is. It's the the goat-faced girl coming out of the carriage. Isn't that a great carriage? So there's more. And then I got the turnips from Google's Great. And I had to make them look a little bit scraggly. And this is cooking. Now, nobody is safe when I'm trying to get reference. And Anna had a friend visiting from college. And I had to get peppers for the background. And eggs and, you know, just look at everything to make sure there's a sense of realism, even though it's not realistic. And there I am. So I won't make anybody do what I won't do. And you'll notice in the next picture, anybody do what I won't do. And you'll notice in the next picture, I did trim down my waist quite a bit. And when we were in the UK visiting my middle daughter, I made everybody stop all the time so I could take pictures of sheep. And they finally came and used me. My students, they are not safe either. And this is my favorite. That's my husband wearing his bike shorts and Anna's swimming medal. And Leah is wearing a lovely, lovely dress that I got at Ambets. And Anna has on a towel and a bathrobe. And Dan really got into it. He's very supportive. Anna was a little more skeptical. And this is the final. Now, the paintings were done. I did all the paintings. I had a contract. And then there, I think it was it 2008, I think, and right before the election, and it was supposed to come out, but then I think the economy tanked. And so I had to wait a while. I was expecting it to be published fall 2008, and it finally was published in fall 2009. And this is when I found out. I got this email from David Gauthier saying, I know this is going to be hard to believe, but we are actually getting to work on your book, which is scheduled for fall. Those were the nicest words I ever got in an email. There were a few changes. They were a little hesitant to ask me to do this, but and they stuttered a little bit, but they said, well, it just looks like he's, you know, peeing, or about to, and maybe that's not such a good thing. So I said, oh, would you like me to paint in a yellow stream? And he said, no. So I did a new one. I revised it, so I just changed it so that you could see where his hands were. And then, it's a little distorted, but this is our excerpts from the book. So, I'm going to turn on the lights right after this and talk to you about marketing the book, because that's an important aspect too. And it doesn't stop when the book is printed. So you have to develop your marketing skills as well as your artistic skills. But before I do that, here are some people I like to look at. I liked when I did this book, I liked looking at the unicorn tapestries, especially this one. And Peter Bruegel, I like the substance of his figures. And Henri Rousseau, that I think you can see in some of the early paintings. And that's it. But before Leah and I are going to answer any questions you have. But I wanted to tell you that I do have another book coming out, and it's coming out in the spring, and it's called Just Perfect. And this one, Leah didn't have time. She's working on another fairy tale, hopefully, but this one I wrote myself, and it's got few words, so it wasn't that hard. Ha ha. I think you'll want to ask questions. Marketing is like this: doing events, having shows. I've had a couple of gallery shows with the drawings, with the paintings, and showing the process as well, and giving talks at schools, libraries, bookstores, and wherever people will have you. I think is important. Having the show in the hallway here, I think, just making people aware. And you can't think that just once you've got your book out there, you're done. That most, especially small publishing houses like Godine, do not have a big promotional budget. So if you want your book to do well, you have to keep doing what you can yourself. I sent letters, also emails to different libraries. And now I know it's in over about 500 library systems around the world. So I know it's in Australia, it's in Canada, it's in most states. Although it's not listed in the Google, it's not listed that it's in Vermont, but I know it's in Vermont because it's here and other libraries. Yeah, but when you go to the Google Books, and the library part, it's not listed for some reason.
You need to look at the, it's called the OCLC WorldCat database, and that will tell you where it is in all libraries.
I've been looking at
WorldCat.org.
Okay, yeah, I thought that's where I was going.
Vermont libraries are tiny, so they're listed with Vermont Department of Libraries. So it's probably in the in libraries in Vermont, but it doesn't display as it is. You have to look at the Vermont Department of Libraries website to find it. Okay. But it's here, sure.
Good. Good. Does anybody have any questions about the process or?
Yes. When you sent out the dummy, trying to get a publisher, did you send out the entire dummy, full book dummy?
I did, but this was after they sent the postcard back.
After, so what did you send before the part of your package?
I'll show you. I think I've got this, and I can pass it to you. Although there was a letter, there was a little letter, and it says, "I hope you will enjoy the note cards." There are 8 different illustrations, because I was trying to sell a couple other ideas for the books, but they weren't well written. Leah didn't write them. And it would be great if you could fill out and return the card, the soft dress stamp envelope. So I sent this out, and I sent this as a gift. And when they sent this back, then I sent the dummy. But I wouldn't send it without it, because then it would just be, and I sent a self-dress stamp envelope too, so they could return it to me, unless they were going to publish it.
Which there was no sample of the book itself in that.
There are samples of some of the illustrations,
But not the text.
not the manuscript. They don't want, and then when I sent out the dummy, I also sent out a typewritten manuscript. Different publishing houses will have listed on their website how to submit manuscripts or ideas. In most cases, this is an unusual situation. In most cases, they don't want you to have an illustrator and manuscript together. They would want samples from illustrators, unless you're doing your own book. And, but otherwise, this is unusual, and David even commented that it was a lucky thing that he liked both of the story and the illustrations. But sometimes if they like a manuscript and don't care for the illustrations, the person who's done the illustrations would be out of luck. So you don't. There are books that tell you how to do this, like Writing with Pictures by Uri Shulvitz.
I think it's also worth saying that as far as the publishing house goes, I didn't really exist. My name's not on any of the contracts. My mom was treated as both the author and illustrator, and I just was along for the ride. I mean, my name is on the book, but legally I don't have any rights, and they didn't worry about me at all. So I think that in some ways puts us more, even though there are two of us, puts us more in the category of someone who both wrote and illustrated, because they just had to deal with my mom.
And how many of the packages did you send out?
I think, I don't really remember. It seemed like thousands at the time, but I'm sure it was closer to about 40, maybe, I'm guessing. But, I made stickers. I had the cards. I bought these boxes online, and I printed these myself. The cards, if you want to look at these, yeah. There we go. So a lot of it was just handwork myself. The cards I had printed at school where I teach, Damon College. They have a print shop, and they did a really good job. And it worked out. It worked out really well. And I'm when I get my third book to this point, I don't have an agent. I haven't found. It might be a good idea to have an agent, and at some point, but I don't feel like I'm ready yet.
Your publisher didn't ask you to sign like an exclusivity clause where your next book would be with them?
Well, they did say they do have the right of first refusal, but since it sometimes it takes them a while to get to the point where they're ready to do a new book, especially by the same author, I probably could have gone with someone else. I like David Godine. I think they do a beautiful job printing, and I like the company that I keep with the other books there too.
How many responses did you get for requests for dummy?
Oh, I'm going to say like 10.
Out of 40 responses.
I'm guessing for all of it. I could go home and look through my studio and try and figure it out. But and some people would answer. It might have been more than that. I have a collection somewhere. But some of them would say, no, we're not interested. But I seem to think I sent out about 6 dummies. So I got more than that in responses. But not all of them were, yes, we want to see them. Yeah.
Is that an unusual way of going about doing that?
I don't know. I sort of did, because even when I was doing editorial illustration, I would try and market myself in different ways that would be noticeable, a little bit more noticeable. The art has to speak for itself, but you also, so you don't want to do something so clever that they don't notice the drawings. Like people have done puzzles, I know, and people hate them. The art directors just hate them. They're just going to throw them out. They're not going to spend time putting together a jigsaw puzzle of someone's arm. So you have to make it something immediate, something that you won't kill yourself if you have to do, you know, a large number, and something that can be noticeable. But the work, most art directors will say it's the work itself that matters.
Did you, when you did your dummy, it looked as though the pictures were done in pen and ink, were they, or were they pencil?
They were done in
Brush and ink?
I'd done them in pen, and then I scanned them, put them in Photoshop, and did the shading in Photoshop.
Oh.
So even though I do like computers, but I don't like computer art, but I think it's a great tool for things like putting this dummy together.
Mhm.
Finals and the real paints.
Finals are oils. Yeah, and
Oils?
yeah,
Oh.
these are oils. I paint very thinly though,
Mhm.
so it's
What do you mix it with?
just terpenoid and some linseed oil.
Do you put a surface down on the paper?
This is board. It's gesso board.
Uh-huh.
So it's already gessoed, it's heavy. That's one thing that the publisher doesn't care for because they can't send them, they scan them in Boston, and I have to drive them. I drive them to Boston or meet somebody somewhere, and they take it. It's a production, but I like it as a surface, smooth surface.
What would they rather see?
Paper,
Paper that
something
bends?
light.
Uh-huh.
Not so much bends, but isn't so heavy.
Isn't so.
This is huge. It's very big.
Yeah.
Comes that large?
What the
The gesso board?
oh yeah, yeah. I think they come up to 18 by 36, and that's not. I've done bigger ones. That one's bigger.
Do you work on a one-to-one scale, actual size that you finished?
There I did. I think I did.
No, it's a bit bigger.
It's a bit bigger, right? About 20%, I think. Yeah. But the next book, I think I did. I'm pretty sure I did 100%, because I do pretty detailed paintings anyway.
Is there a standard size format?
It's pretty loose. The standards about children's books are 32 pages, and that allows not counting end pages.
And they don't like very much text. Our story is, I think, wordier than what they usually publish. I just remember them telling me to cut it down quite a bit, and eventually I, was like, I can't make it any shorter, and they said, okay, it's good enough. But
We age at school anyway, when kids are ready to read as many words as you wrote, they're likely going to be reading in a format that's not a
Chapter
picture
books.
book.
Yeah.
And
What-
fairy tales are not the most marketable thing right now either. But that's one of the nice things about going to a smaller publisher. They're more willing to do things because they like them.
Mhm.
And they're not, with a big, huge publisher, they check your book not only has to get through the editor, it has to get through marketing, and also the person in charge of the warehouse who has to go and see if they have any books that are kind of like your book, still stacked up in the warehouse.
Leah, were you aiming for a specific grade, age, reading level?
no, I wrote, like my mom said, I wrote this story for her as her class project. It was, when I was younger, I read a lot of fairy tales, and then when I babysat kids, I would tell them stories instead of reading them stories, which they liked because it was something new for them. And I would change them because traditional, if you read traditional fairy tales, they're, A, oftentimes pretty creepy, and B, not so great for women. Yes. So when when I would tell them stories, I would change things. And so when my mom was asking for a story that she could, for a class, that was one that I sort of had ready to go in my brain. And it was also a story that, because it's a retelling of a traditional fairy tale, it's, no one had to worry about, copyright, that's the word. So yeah, I didn't write this story with not realizing that anyone other than, my mom and her classmates would see it. And it was actually kind of interesting during the editing process. People would say things to me about like themes or like, oh yes, that motif. And I'm like, I have themes? So it was yeah, I was not writing it with any particular audience in mind, but the kids who I told this story to, one was like in the 4 to 6 range, and the other one was about 8. So
4 to 8.
that's who I was thinking, and I think based on people that we've.
It depends. It depends on the child. I mean, because some children are so ready and have been read to since the time they were 2. And other children don't have the patience to sit through a long story. So it depends what they're used to and on the individual kid, if they have ants in their pants or not. But some kids, I've been told, they just, love it. And even little ones, like 3-year-olds. And they like it for different reasons. Some just like what they call the chicken head at the end. But I think it does make a difference who the child is.
But does the publisher market it?
Yeah, what was the age? But you know what? I've seen it when it's been reviewed. I've seen the age that they put it down. It varies. That from it got a starred review from Publishers Weekly, and also what's the other one? The School. Scholastic. No, not Scholastic. What?
School Library Journal?
Yes, School Library Journal. So, but they had different ages then every review I've seen has had a different age. So, I don't know. And but my next book is for younger kids, much younger.
More picture, less story.
More picture, less story. Simple story. But I still have to, after she's done with her silly doctorate work.
Just as soon as I finish my dissertation, you're next.
I'm next. Oh.
Are you going to illustrate that?
Oh,
She actually usually does help me out with the presentations that I have to give. I'll send them off to her. I'll put everything in and I'll be like, Mom, I'm sending you a PowerPoint. Can you make it pretty? So she does.
And I did a logo for you.
She art directs my dissertation.
I did a logo for your business.
Yes.
And for your
For the conference I organized.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very handy having an illustrator in the
Sounds like
family.
a great team.
Yeah. We have fun together.
And your new book is named what?
Just Perfect.
Just Perfect.
Yeah, it's actually they have it out for pre-sale now.
Mhm.
And some places it says it's coming out this September. It's not.
Oh.
It's coming out in the spring. Yeah.
2012.
Yes. Yeah. But it's a cute book, and it's, I would say, what, 2 to 4?
Is it about people or animals?
It's
or?
got animals. It's about people and animals. A little boy who has parents and decides they think that they would like to be 4 instead of 3, so they get a dog. But it sheds too much fur, and the teddy bear and the little boy are both sneezing. And it goes on.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to spoil the ending.
No, we have to keep the ending.
But it's called Just Perfect.
Yeah. I wondered with the package that you sent out here, I'm seeing the note cards, but they don't refer to a particular book, I don't think. So on the card, the postcard, it says, yeah, that I'd be interested in seeing the dummy for this one, this one, this one. How would they have known which one they might like to see?
That's a good question. I guess most of the time was hoping they'd go for all three,
Uh-huh.
and most of the time they did.
Oh, okay.
And
So
then-
really you sold them on
I was-
your artwork.
Yeah, and I sent manuscripts for all three, and the other, well, one of the stories that I look back at was a real mess, and the other was an alphabet thing,
Mhm.
and there are just so many alphabet
Yeah.
things. You really have to come up with something new. So it's hard. You have to be a business person as well. Are you writers or all illustrators? Writer, is there a group here of children's book writers and illustrators?
Big time. Oh, yes.
Uh,
But they're all professional.
But do they meet together?
Yeah.
Well, they would welcome
No.
they don't welcome
They
non-professionals?
don't.
Oh,
But we have had a non-professional group,
I
and
know.
I wonder whether Karen Hess used to be, no, I know, not anymore, but she used to
they
do
don't
that.
welcome non-professionals.
Yeah.
Well, you
I
mean
think
you have to have
they're more-
something published before they?
Yeah.
Because we have a group in Buffalo which is open to anybody, and you don't have to sign up. You show up at a bookstore and once a month and bring work, and we take turns critiquing it. And some of the work is really, really good, and some of it is not so good.
Mhm.
But
That's great.
it's been, yeah. And one of the most helpful people is a writer who hasn't been published yet, but I think is well on her way.
Mhm.
And she's really investigated everything from publishers to reps to market, everything, and she knows her craft, and so she's one of the more valuable people in the group.
She both writer and illustrator.
Writer.
Can I ask you about your editorial work?
Sure.
I thought it was particularly successful because the concept was always identifiable in whichever one that you showed us. So since you don't have an agent, how do you go about getting those assignments?
It's similar. I send out work. You have to there's artists and artist marketplace book, and I look at those. I get addresses. I haven't been doing that for years between teaching and the children's book thing. I've been busy with that, but when I was doing that, I would, I make lists of people who are art directors, who are at different newspapers. You have to make sure they're current and find out. You don't want to bother them, but you want to find out who at the publication to send your samples to. Sometimes they have art buyers, sometimes they have art directors. And you send your samples, and you send, hopefully, sometimes a year later they'll call. Sometimes, it'll turn into a, every month doing spots. That's happened, or sometimes it'll just be a one-time deal, or once every 6 months or something. So it's marketing. And that book, The Marketplace, the Artist Marketplace, which comes out every year, is I've gotten some good clients from them. But also you don't want to go to the library and look in the masthead and see who the art director is, and make sure they're still there, and send stuff to them. It's a lot of work, and that's one of the things I try and tell my students is it's not like an engineering degree. when you get out, someone's just going to be saying, oh, you want a job?
It's not like that anymore for any industry.
Yeah, that's true. But even less so for illustrators. So anyway, I don't know if you have any more questions. Not to be crass or anything, but if anybody wants a signed illustrated book, we are happy to oblige.
And what was the name of the book by Yuri Shulevitz?
Writing with pictures.
Writing
I
with
got, so I got it right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's very good. It's very good.
Oh, Shulevitz, right.
SHULEVITZ.
No C, huh? S-H-U, okay.
Yeah, but you'd find it anyway, right?
Yeah, I would have gotten that.
Yeah.
I was close enough.
It's a good one, and then
That's
there are books about marketing children's books too, and a marketplace for children's books. But if you're interested in the editorial stuff too, the Artist's Marketplace is by the Graph. I can't remember exactly the name, but you'll find. Thank you very much for coming today. I know it was difficult for you in the past few days because of Hurricane Irene, and it was a pleasure to be here.